All right, let's get started. My name is Brandon, and I'm a tectonic teaching artist. I'm also a theater artist and singer-songwriter. And I've been working with Tectonic for about 6 years now as a part of the teaching faculty, as well as developing some new plays with them. So I'm really excited. As Moises said, we really like celebrities. We get so excited to get to work with theater teachers. So I'm very excited to be here to kind of share this with you. So Moises kind of gave you an overview and a thing of what moment work is. So I'm going to take you through a very accelerated process of what we call level 1, which is the beginning of moment work, how we teach moment work to new participants who've never done moment work before. And so we're going to kind of go through an accelerated process of in this hour and 15 minutes. So the first thing get to the bunker. That's what that sounds like to me. All right, so what I want to ask is you can just leave everything, take your last sip of water, of coffee, whatever you need. And one last thing, and then it's all yours. I'm so sorry.
Bronwyn. Desiree.
Here.
G. I just said it wrong. G. Edwin Robinson. I did. Neva or Neva?
Neva, here I am.
Neva. Rachel White.
Yes. Good match.
Spencer Leopold. I just like saying Leopold. Nicholas. Lauren Brown. Lauren. Sherry.
Yes.
Theodore Nutba. Theodore. Addie. Roberta. Brandon. Andrew Stahl.
Yay.
Craig Roberts.
Yeah.
Video. Jarde.
George.
Thank you, George. Jillian Fletcher. Lynn.
Yep.
Thank you. And Michelle Reason. Great. Sorry.
No worries. All right, what I want to invite you up is in this space here, I want you to come up. We're going to form a standing circle, and I want us to create a beautiful circle, whatever that means to you. In this space, it might be more vocal. A beautiful circle. Teamwork. If anyone needs a chair or anything, we're going to stand for a little bit. So if anyone needs a chair, just feel free to grab one. Does anyone want to make any adjustments to our beautiful circle to make it more beautiful? Great. Is everyone happy? Anyone else want to make any other adjustments to our circle? So, you're all theater teachers. Why do we start a lot of theater work in circles? Yeah.
You can see everybody.
You can see everyone. Why else might we start work in theater practice in a circle?
No power position.
Great. There's no power position. Everyone's on an equal footing.
Community.
Forms a sense of community.
Standing gives off more energy than sitting.
Great. It's energizing. You can all feel each other's energy while looking at each other.
It's easy to do.
It's easy to do.
Yeah, typically all our focus is at the same point.
Yeah.
Eventually in a circle. And that creates power.
Yeah. So, when I say we create a beautiful circle, we often start our workshops this way at Tectonic as well, and why we say create a beautiful circle is we want to give you right away the feeling of agency, that you are going to be active participants in this workshop. I am facilitating it, but really the work that's going to be done is being done by all of us. And so we really like to set that right away, that we are creating a space where we all have agency to be learners and teachers and active participants. And I think this is a beautiful circle. So what I want to do first is we're just going to do a quick name and gesture pass just so I can hear your names loud. In an hour and 15, you will remind me of your names because I will not remember them all of yours in 1 hour. But I want you, what we're just going to do is I'm going to say my name and do a gesture that tells me, is going to tell you something about me. So it can be something very specific, like I can do this to play the guitar because I play the guitar. If I'm a little shy, your gesture could be this. It doesn't have to be something, but just something that tells me something about you. And so I'm going to say my name and gesture, and then we're all going to repeat it, and then we're going to go all the way around the circle and see if we can do it semi-quickly. So we'll practice once. If I went, Brandon, you'd all go.
Brandon.
How you doing? Oh,
I thought we were doing it.
That was practice. All right, so I'll start, and then yes, ready. I remember your name, so Matt. We're going to go around this way. All right. Any questions for Mr. Brandon.
Brandon.
John.
John. Kelly.
Kevin.
Neva.
Nina.
Jillian.
Jillian.
Edwin.
Edwin.
Andrew.
Andrew.
Rachel.
Rachel.
Allie.
Ellie.
Sherry.
Sherry.
Ted.
Ted.
Nick.
Nick.
Brianne.
Brianne.
Desiree.
Desiree.
Spencer.
Spencer.
Amanda.
Amanda.
Michelle.
Michelle.
Brian.
Brian.
Christina.
Christina.
Lynn.
Lynn.
Bronwyn.
Robin.
Red.
Hooray.
Awesome. What gestures stood out to you? Did anyone's gestures stand out to anyone? And why?
The fencing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And why does it stand out to you?
It's a big gesture.
Yeah, there was a lunge involved. My lunges in for the day, thank you. Anyone else's that really stood out to you?
I like that. See, now I don't remember the name, but I heard the gesture. Michelle, right?
Yes.
Oh, it's Michelle. I don't.
Any others? Yeah.
The circle? Yes.
Yeah. And why do those gestures stand out to us? Do you think? What is it about a gesture that stands out to us? Why do we connect? What did we learn about each other from these? Yeah.
It's an action.
Yeah, it's speaking its own thing. Right away, I know something more about each of you, more than you probably would have to tell me a few full sentences to communicate what you just communicated in one gesture. And so that's something that we like to think about as we're diving into what moment work is, looking at specific moments of different elements of the stage, is how do each thing communicate on its own, right? You were able to communicate a lot about your personality. It's like some of those, I was like, about a personality, you're a very calm person probably. Some of your business, right? And so you didn't have to tell me a whole story about or display that in one gesture. A lot was communicated to me. Now, we might all interpret that slightly different based on where we come from, but just thinking about how small things that we sometimes take for granted can really communicate a lot more than we think it's going to. So, what we're going to do is, we talked about it a little bit, but I want you to think about, and if you want to take a seat on the floor, if you want to sit in the chair, we're going to kind of stay in the circle. If you need a chair, if you need a bench, I'm going to sit on the floor, but if you're welcome to, if you need a chair, if you need to pull one up, or you can move your spot in the circle, yep. And just like Barb was talking about in the full room, I want you to think about a moment in theater, something you saw, not that you were a part of, something you witnessed as an audience member, a moment in theater that will stick with you until you die. This is that wow moment that like took your breath away. You will go to your grave thinking about this theatrical moment. And I want you to be very specific. So I don't need you to tell me the whole plot of the story, but I want you to think about what was that specific moment, what happened, what's happening on stage in that specific moment that really blew your mind. And we won't have time to share everybody's, because we can seriously spend a whole hour 15 talking about these moments, because it's something exhilarating. But just take a second to think about it, and I'm just gonna have a few people share out in a second. Just really think about what was that specifically happening on stage in that moment. Is anyone ready to share? Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of old school, but I remember the first time I saw Chorus Line. And when they first established the line after the opening number, first of all, it was just, a black stage, but all the different postures. You could tell so much about the characters and what was to come, just by the way they were standing.
Just like our anniversary badge here. Yeah, another.
I went to see Miss Saigon when I was a teenager, and in like the opening number, the main character was running across the stage, slipped, fell into the pit. They grabbed him, pulled him back up, but it kind of took you out of the magic of it. And, it said to me, even the professionals, it's gonna happen.
Right? Another.
I saw the production of The Glass Menagerie that had Celia King of Culture as Laura, and I will never forget that surprise that I felt when Laura emerges from memory out of the couch. And like, I don't know, it was both just sort of the shock of the moment, how they did it, and how it really created that sense of, you have a sense of place, and then all of a sudden that person's in there in your memory. It was really powerful.
Another.
There was a time I saw Last One Coming in previews, and it was Denzel Washington's last speech, and he's working, he's doing everything, and he's putting his all into it, and then out of nowhere, line, and the whole theater erupts laughing, and then they give him the line, he goes right back into it. I was like, that's confidence. Hey, just line, give him a line. And he just goes right back into it in the theater, and they didn't laugh at him. It was like we enjoyed the humanness of it.
Yeah.
I went to see Aladdin on Broadway, because I just did Aladdin Junior with my middle school cast. And there was a moment on stage where Jafar had just become Sultan, and it's this like, I don't know, maybe 30-second moment where there's all of this smoke, and it's when he like is getting pulled back into the lamp. So he goes through like 3 costume changes instantly, and the costumes are immaculate. Just like all of that work and all of that energy into that 30-second moment, but just everything.
Yeah.
It was so close.
Dreamgirls, with Jennifer Holliday. The end of Act 1, when she sings the things, some famous song in Atlanta Town. But it's the one gesture that she does at the end where she reaches out across this table and she takes a deep gasp. And the audience hushed silent, curtain came down, and then the yelling started. So it's just that one gesture.
So, thinking about all these moments that you just showed me, could keep going. I mean, I love listening to these, like one of my favorite parts, because you just like see like that spark of joy that kind of probably put us all on the path that we're on, or part of why we continue on the path we're on. Thinking about those, just like they were talking about, did any of those moments were something like, it was this text that they spoke that I really connected to? That was what made the wow moment. No, I mean, text is present in some of these moments for sure, but was it that the thing that made us remember this theatrical moment until we die? No. And so what we're talking about with moment work is that, as he was talking about, most of the theater is created with text first, and you build up all these other elements to kind of dress up what the text has already done. But none of the other people involved have agency to actually create the story that you're telling. They're all just in service of the text that already exists. And we think that's a little backwards, because everything that you just described, all these moments that you just shared, were not about the text. It was about this, where these theatrical things were aligning in a way that created these magic moments. There was costumes, it was the reality of like our terrific performer who was able to, like had that confidence. It was gesture, right? And the way that we create those moments is allowing each of those elements to have the room to be a storyteller in the room. And so moment work was really designed to create a platform for work to be created where we're kind of letting all of the elements speak on their own and seeing what the power of each element is, so that we allow them the space to be communicating as a part of the show and not just dressing up the text. Does that make sense? So one thing we like to talk about is what we call the elements of the stage. So for us, the elements of the stage are anything that can communicate from the stage. So you already kind of said a bunch of them in the moments that you talked about, but what are some things that communicate from the stage? What are some of the elements that people talk about in their moments, and then we can kind of add to this list? Costumes. I'm a lefty, so please forgive me. What else?
Lighting.
Lighting, awesome.
Gesture.
Gesture.
Movement.
movement. Uh,
Set.
Set. Props.
Sound.
Sound. And you could break that down into probably many categories, spoken sound, recorded sound, right? Foley.
Nobody said it, but I could see it in each thing that everyone said, which was lighting.
Lighting. Oh yeah, we have, yep, definitely. Very powerful element. What else?
Facial expression.
Great, facial expression. This is me trying not to smudge it because I read on the other side. I'll just smudge everything, right?
Body language.
Body language. I'm going to add this to movement. Body language. Yeah.
Music.
Awesome. Music. And again, music can be performed live, it can be recorded. Energy. I love that. Makeup. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Story.
Story. Yeah. And what do you mean by that?
Narrative, beginning, middle, end.
Great. So a narrative. And that's usually going to be expressed from the stage through maybe a lot of these elements, maybe text, maybe, right? I mean, we'll definitely put text on this list. Like they were saying, we are not anti-text. If you go to any tectonic play, there's a lot of text. We're just saying that this also, this doesn't have to be the only element that gets to speak. Any other elements? Keep going. What?
People?
Actors, like actors or people, and also the audience, right? Is also a part. If you have the audience on stage, like a lot of productions have, they're communicating.
Space.
I love that. The space that you're in, right? If you're in this space versus a classroom versus a giant auditorium versus a pie shop in London, right? Anything else? Great.
Maybe the surprise or the subversion of expectation.
Yep. We've even had on this list, like one time someone said bacon because they cooked bacon on stage and the smell was so powerful, right? So we could keep adding this, and as we create, as we work on a workshop of this, we would keep adding to this list as we go. So we might discover new things that are communicating from the stage. So in moment work, level one, which is what we're going to explore today, we like to kind of break down these elements and find how does each element speak on its own. So level one is about really unlocking the theatrical potential, the theatrical and narrative potential of each of the elements individually. Because often when I think of a prop, I think, oh, that's just something I carry, because that's character, it says in the script that I have to carry this thing. But what else can a prop do, right? What else could a prop become? Like when Barb created that one prop and then it became full of meaning. It was not just a person anymore, right? So thinking about how do we unlock the creative and theatrical potential of each of these elements individually so we understand their power and we allow them the space to speak. Because some of these elements are very loud, some of them are very quiet. Lighting, very loud element. Sound, obviously, right? You can hear a siren immediately, that's doing so much storytelling. Whereas a prop, it takes a little bit more room to let a prop communicate at the same level of sound, so you have to make room for it. So we kind of think about it as like, when you get to level 2, it's like composing with these elements, right? Right now we're just trying to understand what each instrument can do. So we're gonna start with one of the quietest, well, not that quiet, but a gesture moment to teach you kind of the moment work construct which Barb shared with you. But I'm just gonna I want us to give us a chance to all have a win right away. We're all gonna create a moment. And just so you can see the construct that we use and the container that it is, and then we're going to kind of move on and explore a few of these different elements of the stage today with as much time as we have to kind of show you how we can start to unlock the theatrical potential, and then think about how can we start arranging them to start maybe thinking about how would you start creating a piece, start creating a narrative out of these ideas. So if we can stand back up in our circle, or join our beautiful circle, which will be looked at right now. And so, as Barb shared, the moment work construct is simple, and it's simple on purpose because we want to create a construct that is very easy to use, and then what goes inside of it can become more and more complex as you become more and more familiar with the work. So the construct is really, I begin, something happens, I end. That's it. And for a gesture moment, you're going to say I begin, you're going to do a gesture, and I end. That's it. And just think about the begin. I like to think about the begin as it's almost like the shutter on a camera's closed. When you say begin, I can see what's happening. When you say end, it's closed, I can't see you anymore. So thinking about where a moment actually begins and ends, right? I can say I begin, I end. I could also go I begin, I end, right? So in that second version, I'm still moving as it opens and closes, right? So thinking about where your moment actually begins and ends. And that's important more so later, but just starting to think about that now. So I'm just going to do a gesture moment. We're going to start this way, and everyone's going to just create a gesture moment. There's no right or wrong. There are no mistakes in moment. So I'll start. I begin. I end.
I begin. I end.
Can you do your begin and end? So I begin and I end before you just. So you sort of say out loud, I begin and I end at some point in your gesture.
I'll see it, say same.
So you say I begin in your gesture and I end at some point.
Ooh. What it did. Oh, I'm supposed to say it first. Happy. What else?
You can be moving if you start if you want, but it's your choice. But you just have to have a place where it begins and it ends.
Then I end.
Can you say it? For I begin.
Oh.
Yep.
Happy.
Great.
Begin.
I begin. I end. I begin. I end.
I begin. I end.
I begin. I end.
I begin. I end.
I begin. I end.
I begin. I end. I begin. I end.
I begin. I end.
I begin. I end. I begin. I end.
I begin. I end.
I begin. I end.
I begin. I end.
I begin. I end.
I begin. I end.
I begin. I end.
I begin.
And give yourselves a round of applause. Great. Simple, right? That's the point. It's simple. So what you just created was what we call a solo gesture moment. So that's if one person's making a moment. And then, like I said, what's inside of that moment could be as simple as one gesture. It could be a sequence of 14 elements with light, sound, actors moving, right, text. It can have all those things. So it grows as you start creating a piece. But that's the simple construct of I begin, I end. So we also do, as they showed, what we call group moments, where three people are working together. We say we begin and we end instead. I want to just show you quickly. So I'm just going to pick three out at random. So you're going to start. So you three are going to be a group. So what's going to happen is you're going to do the exact same gesture you did. Don't change it at all. You're going to say we begin. You're going to do your gesture. When you get to the end, you're just going to freeze. When she freezes, you'll do yours and freeze. you'll do yours and freeze, and then you'll say we end when you're done. All right? And I just want to watch what happens. I've thrown 3 random moments together, so you'll start whenever you're ready.
We begin.
We end.
So what happened when we just threw these 3 gesture moments together? What just happened? Yeah.
You can kind of infer a story based on it.
So you started inferring a story. Did I ask them to make a story? No. What were some stories that we inferred?
I inferred, I know she's human, but that she was like asking this person to marry her or him or whatever, and she like, you know, they put the ring in the grass or something, and she picked it up, and then that was like the mother-in-law, and she was like, oh my god, oh my god.
Great, because someone see a different interpretation. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought they were at a grave site,
Mm.
and the first person was picking a flower, smelling like the good memories, and the second person was giving thanks, and the third person was sick over the death.
So this is a great example of how moment work is powerful. I didn't ask them to create a story. We threw together, we sequenced 3 different moments together, and right all of a sudden we start, our brains can't help but start telling stories, right? And that story that just got created, if I told them to go sit down and write a story, that probably wouldn't happen, right? So there's an exploration of, the things that might get created by kind of creating moments and then starting to sequence them, playing with them. We might discover things that are actually more interesting than what we would discover on our own, sitting in a room in the dark, right? The second thing I want to say is, we watched that same thing, but we all are going to bring our own life experience to it. So we have 2 things we call structural analysis of a moment, which is what actually physically happened. If I structurally did analysis of that, I'd say moment maker 1, step forward, bend down. Like, it's what actually we all would agree physically happened in the space. So if we needed to replicate it, that would be what we would say is the structural analysis. The interpretive analysis is what we all just did, whereas you saw it as a funeral, you saw it as a wedding proposal, right? So if we then as moment makers had a point of view of what we wanted it to say, then it's like, how do we change the structure of that moment to communicate what we intend? So that's a little bit of how we look at moments a little bit differently, just to start thinking about what is physically happening, because then we could change the order. So let's just change the order and see what that happens. So when you start this time, you're gonna say we begin, do yours, you, and then we end. And just see what happens if we change the order.
We begin.
We end.
What changed just by changing the order of those 3 moments?
Mood.
Mood, yeah, there's definitely a very different mood that time. What else? Did the story we were seeing change as well?
There's a sense of more immediacy. Whatever happened first.
Yeah.
And the others reacted.
Uh-huh.
As I saw it.
So just thinking about that's how we start kind of thinking about what these moments can do once we start unlocking them. So now that we've created our first moments, we're going to move on to the next element, an element that often gets overlooked. And someone did say it, it's the element of space, and we like to call it architecture. And this is a great thing, especially for theater teachers who are often creating theater in rooms that are not made for theater, is that we always start with architecture moments when we're creating a piece because it's about bringing the space to life. So our definition of architecture is anything in the space that can't be picked up and moved, right? So like this is not architecture because I could move this around, right? However, this curtain is architecture because I'd have to really do something. It's part of the space, right? So anything that is part, water bottles, also not architecture. So anything that is attached to the space that cannot be moved is architecture. So anything on the ceiling, any of this stuff. And so why we do this and explore it is we want to bring the space to life and also explore what is the theatrical potential of the space that we're in. And how do we unlock it for maybe then creating moments as we continue to go. So what I want you to do is everyone's going to just have a second to start. I'm going to just in a second invite you to walk around the room, and I want you to look for something in the space that you did not notice right away that is really interesting to you. So something that maybe catches your eye that you're like, oh, I didn't notice that, but that's really weird about this space, or that's really interesting, I didn't know that this was there. And once you find something, you're gonna create a moment where you bring our attention to what you find interesting in this space. So when we're creating architecture moments, the focus is on the architecture, not on you performing something. So it's not you, I'm being an actor to perform something. It is, you're gonna use your body and space to bring our attention to something in the room that you find really interesting. So for example, if I was like looking around and something I find, oh, is this door maybe, does it open? I might create a moment where I explore this door and then I could maybe disappear behind it, right? Or you could find, if you see something in the space, you might create, oh, I like this grid, so how do you create a moment to highlight this grid and make us notice it? So your goal is to create a moment with an I begin, an I end that's gonna bring our awareness to what you found in the space that you think is really exciting. Any questions about that? No? All right, so take a second. I'm gonna give you like 2 minutes to just walk around the space. Sometimes it's helpful to like get down at a different level, to maybe go stand on something, right? Really try and find something new, something that you didn't notice when you first came in here. Yeah, so it's something that cannot be like moved and picked up and taken out of the space. And so it should be something that's a part of the space, no matter what we did. So take a moment to explore. Really look for something that, oh, maybe that surprised me. I didn't see that when I first walked in here. And once you found something that you're interested in, I want you to create a moment. So think about how you can keep your body in space. Start with an I begin. Do something with your body to highlight this piece of the architecture, and then an I end. So take a second, about a minute or two, to create an architecture moment to highlight something you find exciting about our space. There's a lot going on in this space. Take another minute to practice your moment. So your I begin, what you're going to do, and your I end. Highlight the piece of architecture that you found and want to share with the group. All right, does someone want to share their architecture moment? Great, so who we got? Yeah, it's all right if we're all just, we need to be in a certain space to see it. You can also tell your audience where to be, if they need to be in a specific area to see your moment.
I think I can see it all.
Great.
I begin. I am.
So what did he bring to life in our space for us? What did you notice about the space?
There's space behind that wall.
Ah, yeah, there's like a cavity back there. And his arm, there was like a sense of tension once his arm went in there. Like, what's back there, right? What's gonna happen? I'm still, if you had the monster in the bed, that's even worse. And so thinking about what might be the theatrical potential of that cavity, that someone right away was, oh, that would be really cool for something theatrical to happen, right? What if you put a light inside there, right? So thinking about, okay, now we know that this cavity exists. That's really exciting. Let's see another one.
To begin. I am.
What did he bring our awareness to in space? There's a hole in the floor, right? Yeah. This floor needs to be repainted. Yeah, and there's something also. What else? It wasn't just the visual. What else? What other element was present in that moment? Sound. Yeah, the sound that made is very different than sound here, right? So what might be that potential of that? Another one. Yeah.
I begin.
I
What part of the architecture did you bring your awareness to?
am.
There's space behind the piano.
So there's a cavity behind. There's lots of cavities here. Space behind the piano, maybe. And again, that piano might not be able to. So maybe it is architecture. I think it's real. But there's something right now. It's heavy, so I would give it to you. What else? Let's see another one. Yeah.
There's stuff in front of my,
You can move it.
okay,
Yeah.
and maybe audience could like.
Great. Yes. Thank you. This bag of heads is also very much.
Okay, I begin.
So what did she bring our awareness to? Yeah, these risers, that there's definitely a weight to them, right? They're not gonna be something I can just pull out. It also brought my awareness, so I didn't notice how many there were before. Like I did like and all these the layers of that, which is really interesting. Anyone else notice something about that space? Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I had the same space, or I had the same architecture, well, similar architecture, but I noticed something different,
Let's see your moment.
that's right.
Show us your moment. Yeah.
I begin. I end. Some more cavities.
And the difference between the top, the size of the top one and the what could fit in between each maybe is different. Let's see another one. Do we need to be in a certain space or can we all be where
I'm
we are?
gonna be here.
Okay.
Here are two spaces, yes. I begin. I end.
So I would say that this moved into some different elements. So you had, because this was, I would say, it's quite architecture, because then you can move it, right? But what I find interesting is that the way that interplayed with the architecture around it was fascinating. Did anyone notice anything when you started manipulating these things in that space from where you were standing? Did it bring any part of the space more to life to you? Yeah.
I actually thought you were gonna go for the wire, which I didn't notice before. Interesting when you started with the box.
Yeah, I did notice that too. Like I had noticed that wire running up there, which then brought my attention to this booth too, which I'm like, oh, there's a lot of potential with that. Can we get into that booth? Could I climb that wall? So like I said, again, there's no mistakes in moment work. So even if like we're trying to create a moment about one thing, but another elements are going to automatically, just like sound creep into this one too. That's going to happen, right? So it's just about, it's still going to give us some insight into something. So that created a lot of awareness for different, depending on where we were in the room, which is exciting. You guys need to find that?
Yeah, it's an interesting way to think about it. When you're working with students with disabilities and even on like different severities of that spectrum, you go into places and you do an ecological inventory, right? And it's not just the architecture, you look at everything in the environment so that you can teach people how to independently navigate that space. So it's really interesting thinking of it in the perspective of like not just for independent navigation and like awareness of space, but like how can I dynamize this space with like natural elements that can't be taken out to like improve the quality of the production, which is like a really interesting perspective.
Great, I love that. Love that connection.
Well, and I'm curious about the movable aspect. So for instance, like this piano could possibly move, not as easily as moving a stool.
Right.
And then I think, like, how does that impact the element of space? Because sometimes it's possible, because like that refrigerator can be moved, but most likely it won't.
Yep.
So in a way, that does become the space at the moment, but doesn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because for us,
When does that become
for
a
us,
problem?
well, because we do go through. Eventually, we will get to props and things. So you want to leave room for those other things. Because architecture is really about unlocking the potential. Because if you're going to create, we're going to create a piece in this space. What we're trying to unlock is we can move all the chairs around, we can reformat the room, but what is it about the space that is kind of inherent to the space that we can unlock the potential of that maybe we'll use as we build more moments, and maybe that's going to become the back of a great example for an architecture moment is in Larry project. If you've ever seen a professional production of Larry project, there's a giant sliding barn door in the back that slides open. That's where the video presentation, that's where all the video happens. That exists because in the first space they were creating that piece in, they were in a giant studio that had a giant barn door, and they started making a ton of moments. Sometimes they did reveals, they did all these different things. They created hundreds of moments around this barn door. And so now if you do a professional production in the set thing, that will be there because it was in the rehearsal room where it was created. So if you're creating a piece in a space, this is about unlocking the space so that you can maybe like, this will become the whole, this curtain is gonna become the whole backdrop of this piece, right? So it's about starting to create a common vocabulary about what is the potential, the actual potential of the space we're in, and how can this space speak on its own that maybe will help to tell our story in a way that is creative and theatrical. So we can keep going, but I want to get us into some group moments. So we're gonna do a quick group architecture moment. So I'm just gonna throw you into some groups of probably 4. And you're gonna do the same things, but you're gonna find something, it could be something we've already explored, or it could be a new piece of the architecture that you wanna explore as a group. But now you have 4 people to explore it together. So you're gonna have a we begin, you're gonna use your bodies in space to highlight something about the space, and a we end. And again, the goal is to highlight and bring to life something about the space, so something exciting that you enjoy. So I'm just gonna do, I'll just say 5, so right here. 4, 4, 4, 4. All right? So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to explore the space together, find something that you think is interesting about the architecture, and then you're going to create a moment where we begin. Something happens where you highlight a piece of the architecture, and remember, it might be about the way that this sounds. It might be about the way that you can highlight as 4 bodies, maybe a pattern that's happening in the room, right? So think about now that you have more bodies, how might you highlight something maybe bigger about the architecture, something that maybe it might be harder to show as one person. All right, so it takes about 5 minutes. You're going to explore and then start to create a moment when we begin, we end, to highlight some architecture in this space. And I would say, the more time you can be doing and looking, less time talking.
You could also have like half the sound and half hearing so you can mix it up right there.
But right.
Do we face in the same, I would look at it?
Oh, I'm going
So you the other side?
Yeah.
Oh, I was being the speaker.
Oh, you,
Do you want us to like arm out?
Yeah.
Why not both, or whatever drawing calls us? Right?
Because it could be different, it could actually be different things because of it.
Right.
I could be telling you, play A track on this one.
Yeah.
I could be B track on this.
And I could be saying, this one's like, this is
Is there another one?
this
Right,
one's
just trying to
blown.
hear it.
This one's blown.
No, I'm just.
This would be cute if we were ripping.
Oh, yeah. Was the plug over there cut out, or foot out there, if someone could come.
Is there another hole?
All right, so now that you've found your architecture, create a moment where we begin, we end, where you're, as a group, are highlighting for us what you find exciting about the architecture you found.
And then somebody. Never seen it.
2-minute warning, 2-minute warning, practice your moment. Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I mean, it's really just play that we do at the very early. And then obviously once we start crafting a piece, it becomes, yeah. Yep, I mean, that's really cool, exciting. 60 seconds, practice it one more time, or at least talk through what you're going to do.
That was good. My God, that was
30 seconds.
That was good.
4 more seconds.
Yeah, that's cool. Good discovery. Because that's how I thought.
Yeah, so I'll also start behind.
Yeah.
All right, so is there a group that, yeah, exactly right.
Sorry.
I taught a lot of elementary school for a long time, if you could tell. So, to the bunker! All right, talking cover. Is there a group that would like to share first? I love it! All right, is there a place that we need to be to watch your moment?
I guess I want to be over.
Can we all be over here?
We have to do it.
Yep.
We begin?
We had.
What part of the architecture did they bring our attention to?
The door?
The alcove.
This alcove of the door that it cuts in. What else?
I saw the number.
The numbers. 10, 8, yeah, the 6, they all lined up under a number. Which one?
I saw that was the exit.
Uh-huh. So again, it depends on maybe where we were in the room, right? So us on this side of the room, I saw the numbers much more clearly, whereas I think, yeah, if you're on this side, maybe you're not seeing. So then this is a great example of why it's important to really decide where your audience needs to be to really highlight what you're trying to show. Great, these numbers, which is like, we've all seen those. So something we start doing as we start creating moments is we start naming them. And why we name them is because as we start building on our moments, we might come back to these moments. So once they get introduced in the room, they're all of our property. We might come back to this moment and when we're doing lights and be like, oh, let's do that moment, we're gonna add some lights to it now. So what would we maybe name this moment so we would, the name is just about remembering what happened. Yeah.
The lineup.
And maybe I would even add number lineup.
Yeah, number lineup.
So that I know, I will remember right away, oh, that's when they lined up against the wall.
Was it just the numbers?
Yes.
Or the number and alphabet?
Yeah, I would say because they went in, 2 of them went deeper into the alcove, I did see the alcove as well, because whereas if you just stand in a straight line or pick the place on the wall where you can be flat, I might just be thinking about the numbers, so just thinking about all those things are things that we're going to be taking in as audience numbers.
I see that from the outside.
Great. Another one. All right, this group.
And I think everyone's fine there. I think so.
Stand where you will.
We begin.
end.
Snaps. What do we bring to life now? Speakers. Anything specifically about them? Yeah. They're facing out. Anything else?
Maybe they're not making sound, or they're.
Yeah, it also brought my attention not just to the speakers, but their placement within everything else that's up here, right? This grid is actually, if we bring the attention of the audience up to this, there's a lot going on up there, right? So how would we utilize that maybe in a theatrical way, or highlight certain parts of it? Maybe then, if we were playing with sound, does sound come out of the speakers at some point, right? So I started to think, oh, how might that play with us? What would we name this one?
Speakers.
Soundscape. John brought up a
Soundscape. I love that. I'm gonna do sound.
that if they were on a different grid, there could be different projections of sounds in different parts of the stage.
Or then maybe you think about, like doing hat on a hat. So if they're doing, like, we expect to hear sound, and then a lighting instrument is actually inside of them, or something, light shoots out of them. Like, what would that do, right? So we're talking about some pretty expectations. So think about what is the theatrical potential of these things in our space. How can we play with expectation? Let's see another one.
Okay.
Great. Do we need to be in a certain place? This over here.
We begin.
So what did we highlight about the space? What did we discover?
The curtain or the door?
I think it's a little both, right? The door, and then this ability for people to cross through it and disappear. I mean, the theatrical potential there is exciting. What other elements kind of crept into that moment, though, did you notice?
Comedy.
Character, yeah. So there was some character going on there, right? So normally, our focus of our architecture mode is to really focus the architecture, but that actually, by bringing some character in, they also did highlight multiple things about, each one kind of highlighted something new. Like the first one didn't even touch it. Then we had, maybe there's sound coming from it. The third person actually we heard sound and then opened it, right? So that was still very focused on the architecture, right? We explored a few different things about this door, and then it could also reveal. So that's gonna happen where things start to come in, but our goal in level 1 is to really try to stay focused on the element itself, but which they did, but we have to also acknowledge, character became a part of that moment as well, which is fine. But it's just that kind of keeping those things in our heads, we're thinking about them very specifically when we're thinking about how we craft moments structurally. What do we want to name that one? Door. Do you want to add to that?
I think it's like hiding more than the door. Like,
hiding door? Disappearing door? I love some alliteration. I also can't spell, so you get ready for that. My third graders would love to be like, you spelled that wrong. I know. Another group. Are we okay here?
Yes. I begin.
We end.
Great, what did they bring our attention to?
All the lights.
Yeah, and specifically at first it was interesting these four that are all very uniform. And then what happened after they showed us these uniform lights?
They started fighting lights everywhere.
Yeah, then it opened up and all of a sudden my attention was, because at first my attention was very focused on these four lights specifically. And then it's the way they had arranged their four bodies underneath. And then when he opened it up to this, all of a sudden I was like, whoa, you know what I mean? So thinking about how the specificity of that caught my attention just from 3 gestures and body placement on 4 specific lights, what the power of that is. Anything else that brought up for you? What do you want to name that one? Did you guys know that?
Well, I was gonna say, it really took us through the space, which is like an exciting thing too, because if you think of directionality and like you would attach like where you are in the space, it was like an interesting utilization of that and how you can play with like sauna.
And also thinking about how we can control where the audience, especially in a space like this, we feel like, oh, where are we putting the audience? Are they going to be everywhere? How are we going to control where we don't have a proscenium here, right?
Yeah.
So thinking about the power they had to control all of our attention of where in the space we were focused on. So thinking about how we have that power as moment makers and creators. What was the name that I heard?
Lots of lights.
Lots of lights. Considering the alliteration. Uh-huh. We have one last group, right? Let's see our last group. Are we okay over here? Do we need to be in a certain space?
Your face comes.
Okay.
We face that way?
No, you face
Facing
us.
this out.
We begin.
Oh my gosh. She's so funny.
We end.
What would this bring to life in the space for us?
It was like you became Pippin vibes.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and this curtain, which seemingly, when I just look at it, I would not have guessed there's all these holes in it, right? But there was a tone to that too, right? There was comedic tone. We all reacted comedically to that. So thinking about that's interesting that these holes created comedy on their own, right? They didn't have to like really do much. They just like put a body part through, and it was comedic. Anything else that you noticed about that?
Or just the element of surprise, it was so unexpected. As you mentioned, you don't see it. And then the contrast between like the darkness of the curtain and then just like the lightness of the skin tones popping out. It was
Yeah, and you start thinking about how would I lay a light maybe onto that moment to really highlight that. Also, I expected with a curtain, I automatically expect it to be a reveal to happen this way. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna pull it back, because I was expecting to happen at some point, and that didn't. Instead, the reveal was like them popping through holes, which was really delightful, right? It was really exciting. What do we want to call that one?
Curtain call.
Curtain call. You know when a name sticks, I know that's the response from the room. Uh-huh. So we would continue, doing those to kind of bring this, we've already brought a bunch of these things to life. Now it's all part of our common vocabulary, and we've now created these moment names. As we were creating a piece together, we would come back to these. That form, we might use them 20 times now. We might add, what happens if we add costume pieces to that? Where do specific costume pieces come through, right? Or we might add light stuff or sound. Is there like a soundtrack that's happening behind that might subvert that expectations? Or what if like it was really scary music? Like you could play with how does the tone change if you layer things onto that. So, oh man, for the sake of time. Time. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next element that we would usually move to. We're gonna do like a lightning round. So normally when we're creating a piece together, we bring very specific things into the room. Like we will all bring specific props, costume pieces, lights that kind of connect to the thing we're talking about. We're creating a piece right now, Tectonic, about ACT UP, the AIDS activists. And so when we came together, we all had brought specific props and things that we kind of had researched that might play in the room. When we're doing level 1, we're literally just trying to explore what these things can do. So we're gonna explore props. And so I'm gonna invite us to create our beautiful circle again. And we're gonna do kind of a lightning round prop moment here just for the sake of time. So
Yeah, it doesn't have to do with same spots, do we?
I brought a prop. Secret bag, always exciting, right? And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna place the prop in the middle of the circle. And I'm gonna invite us to create prop moments with it. Now the goal of a prop moment is, we've all seen that Whose Line Is It Anyway game, where you're like, no, it's a phone, no, it's a hat. Not that. So our goal is to discover something about this prop that maybe is surprising. The same way we're discovering things about the architecture, what can this prop do that is maybe interesting, surprising? And because we're kind of exploring as a group, what's happening is you're just gonna come, you might have a hunch, I wonder what it sounds like. So you're gonna come in and maybe make us see what it sounds like. So you're gonna kind of, we're all gonna be exploring together and discovering together. So, and you might see something that someone does that you're like, oh, I wanna riff on that, actually I wanna take that further, right? So exploring what this prop can do. So you'll still come in, you'll do an I begin, you'll explore something with the prop, show us something that you find interesting about it, and then an I end. And we're just gonna try a few different things. I begin. I end.
I begin. I am.
I begin. I am.
I begin. I end.
I begin. I end.
I begin. I am.
I begin. I end.
I begin. I end.
Awesome, let's pause there. So, this is a resistance band. Not very exciting. What have we discovered about this resistance band? What are some things that those moments showed us that this prop might contain?
Sound.
Sound. That snapping sound, right? It also has this flapping sound, right? Movement. The slap, right? Movement, yeah, the way it moves. It can be very fluid. It can also be very taut. That's exciting. What else?
Size, small.
Yeah, it can go from very small and get all of a sudden very big. What else?
Character, like they both became characters.
So it has a transformational quality, right? So we sometimes talk about the narrative flexibility of objects, of props. This seems to have a lot of narrative flexibility. It could be a lot of different things, right? It can transform. Whereas if I brought out my water bottle, less a mask, maybe some, my cell phone, not very much transformational quality. Like this is gonna look like a cell phone no matter what I do, right? So this has what we call some narrative potential. It can do different things. What else?
Shape.
Shape, yeah, it has different shapes. Anything else that we noticed about it?
Color.
Weight of it.
color and weight, yeah, it's very dark, but it also has a shimmer, right? In the light, it shimmers. If I shine light on this, maybe it would do something really interesting, right? It also is like silky and rich. There's something about it that's fascinating that it contains multitudes. Anything else?
It was made to grow.
It was made to grow? What do you mean by that?
You had one.
Oh yeah, that it could, yeah, you could make it seem like it grows. That went on forever, right? Longer than I thought. When does this end? Right? So it was a surprise to me in the moment that it was that long. Anything else? So you can see then how we might go through a bunch of props and explore how might we use this prop other than the way it was intended. And so then we would then have this, okay, we'll have a bunch of moments and a prop moments of, we have all these props in the room, now we know what they can do. So then we would move on to costumes. Now costumes get a little tough because what do you automatically assume with costume?
Character.
Right, character is so intrinsically linked to costumes. Thinking about how do we really highlight what this costume piece can do on its own gets a little tougher because it's very hard for us to think about costume without its connection to characters. But you see a wedding dress, you know what I mean? There's a specific character who wears that, right? So it's very similar to props, but we would kind of explore, again, kind of similar costume piece actually. This is a scarf. Waiting to be worn like this. But what else might this scarf do? Let's find out. And I would also encourage if two people run it at the same time, that you might, or if you have a person next to you, like, what if we do this together? We can do group moments too. If you have a person next to you, like, what if we try this together? Go ahead. Play.
I begin. I end.
I begin.
Oh.
We end.
That's great. So it was first off used as a costume piece, kind of a different kind of costume. But what happened when he came in and joined the moment? What all of a sudden? Yeah, it all kind of became like, oh, wind, right? So, oh, this could help to show setting, maybe help to show what's happening, right? Great, let's keep going. Wind.
Weird.
We begin?
Begin.
We end.
Yes.
We end.
I begin. I end.
Should we begin?
We end. I begin. I end.
Great, pausing there. Awesome. So what did we learn about this costume piece?
You're gonna have to wash your winter
Yeah, I'll have time, I think. What did we learn about it?
Versatile.
It's also versatile. Yeah, it has a lot of narrative potential. Like, it could do a lot.
Be a prop piece as well as a costume piece.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a lightness about it.
Yeah, it's definitely very light. It's very light. But then when they did that tug of war moment, again, just like our prop, it can also become tense.
It's texture.
Texture, yeah. And also, like when some people pulled it up, like it's kind of translucent. I can see through it. It also kind of could become like, it was transformational. It became like a wave at one point. It became, and also the tassels. Your moment really brought these tassels, like the softness of that to me.
Yeah, and inherently has some kind of, it describes motion.
Yeah, there's definitely a motion. Yeah, motion to this, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a very static object.
It also provokes emotion in a way.
Let's talk about the moment we all oohed at. The moment I would interpret as the flag.
Yeah.
Why did we all react to that moment? What happened there that was exciting to us?
His folding was so accurate and evocative.
It was specific. What else?
It's ceremonial that most people can relate to.
So we read that. So we always talked about how we read moments. They can be evocative. They can be literal. They can be metaphorically. They can be all sorts of ways. So you were reading that, but you said
Culturally.
Yeah, culturally, we have a very specific cultural reference point to that.
I also initially thought that you're sleeping and you
Uh-huh.
were putting a blanket
Yeah.
over
Yeah,
your
total
face
surprise.
for
Yeah.
in that
Sunbathing.
moment.
And so the subversion of our expectations there too. And I also thought because of the pattern of it, it looks like a beach blanket or like a table, like what you used it as is a towel, like a, what is that called?
Picnic blanket.
Picnic blanket. And so that it could become that, and then with just one gesture, transform us to a new place. Think about if they started that scene, we sequenced their moment of them eating at the picnic blanket, one laying down as if to sleep, and then the other one folds this up, and we've changed and puts it in the grave. We've changed time period. We've told a whole story with one simple piece of costume. So thinking about the potential that is in all of these elements. We're out of time. But the potential that's in all of these elements. And so moment work, level one is really about unlocking. So we would go through all this. We would then go to lights, sound, and then we finally bring text back in. And then we start layering all of these moments that we've created. What happens if we put this costume moment with that architecture moment in some way? Or with this, we put them on the wall first and then we layer these together. What happens when we start playing? With how do you start putting all of these elements together? And what happens? Just like we put those three gesture moments together randomly, we'll start finding sparks of things that start really exciting us. And so when we're creating a piece together, we usually have what we call an organizing principle or a hunch of what are we exploring. So everything is usually through that prism. But as we're exploring how to unlock these elements, I think this is really great for students, especially level one, to get them starting to think imaginatively. It also will start to show you what are the different aesthetics in your room. All of your students have them. So this is a great way to unlock their own personal aesthetic, because what they're going to bring to each of these elements is going to be unique to them. But it also becomes a common vocabulary that then your whole classroom will start to share. And then you can use that to start building things together. So if you look, you now have our book, which is great. I'm glad they gifted that. Because it takes you through basically all of level one, that what we just explored today in this hour and 15 minutes that went by so fast. But then talks about also level two, which is where we start actually sequencing these things together to start creating narrative. And then level three, which is actually how do we create a whole piece from that. So I would love to answer some questions until they bail us out of here that you have.
They won't actually tell us.
Great, so they'll take a few seconds to
Yeah.
In the costume level part of it, I'm wondering from a student's perspective, because I also kind of felt it myself, though as adults we can all roll with the punches and just create something right off the spot. I felt a little hesitant to jump up to share my idea because of somebody, ruining it.
So what would actually, that's not the way we'd actually do props and costumes. We did that lightning round because I know you're all adults and can handle it. But usually everyone would bring their own props, costume pieces into the room. They would explore, everyone would go off and explore one on their own first and then share something. Just the same way we did architecture. We did something alone, you then did it in groups, and then you brought it back together. So everyone would kind of bring in props and costumes. You would pick a proper costume that you wanted to explore with yourself or with a small group. You would have time to explore it and find the things that you find interesting about it, and then we would share it with the group, the same way we did our architecture moments. So full transparency, that would, in a normal time frame, you would have time to kind of go through that way. So you'd have that same scaffolding of like, letting them explore it on their own first before you're like, do it in a group, right? Any other questions? Sorry.
Can you just speak a little bit about, you were saying, you said in the beginning it's a little different than the whose line is it anyway, using the props. So can you just differentiate between the two? Because
So,
I think I was confused.
Yeah, that's a common thing. So what we're saying is just like, the goal is not to be me as an actor, like, doing something to this prop, right? I'm making it a phone. I'm making it a hat, right? It's more exploring what this, and it might be that this has transformational quality and it can become something new.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's about keeping the focus on what can this do. So is it the shape of it you're interested in? Is it the texture that you're interested in? Is it the sound that you're interested in? And how do you create a moment that highlight the prop? So that's the difference a little bit then versus like, I'm going to make it.
Showing.
I'm going to show you.
Showing
what,
or
right.
the moment.
It's about highlighting what this element can do. And that's true of all the elements. So when you get to lighting or sound, what can sound do on its own that tells a story without me having to put story onto it?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So like using this as a tie actually makes sense because it could be used as a tie versus like turning it into a snake.
Yes.
Yeah, because you're actually interested in, can this be a tie? Can this tie the way a tie would?
Yeah, you're exploring what this thing can
qualities
do versus, and it's about exploration, right? Instead of like forcing something on, showing or forcing something onto these elements. Yeah. Any other questions?
How does text come into play?
So text is the last thing we do explore, and so often text is usually layered on as layering. So we would go back and share these moments again, but we'd have everyone bring in a random piece of text, so like social media post, the back of a cereal box, any like random snippets of short text, and we would do that same moment. Let's say our curtain call, and we would have someone layer different text on and see what happens. Oh, if this text is on there, what happens if this text, what happens if the moment makers speak it? What happens if it's overdubbed? What happens if someone off stage speaks it, right? So just playing with what is different ways we can reintroduce text into the moments that we've already created that are theatrical, and how does it affect the moment? Does it overpower it? Is it creating surprise? Is it a hat on a hat where it's doing the exact same thing that our moment's already doing? So we're very conscious about how we're putting text back in, which is still leaving room for the other elements to have their space to speak. Yeah.
How do you approach it with students or in the group where it's clear you got to throw that out? That doesn't work. Like, and especially with I guess our egos that we're dealing with. Like, how do you then say like once you're paring it down to actually create a piece? There's too many things. Like, how do you say, well, that didn't work? Like, so.
So you'll see as like when you start doing a full thing, a lot of these moments will get repeated. The ones that we're really excited about, the room is really excited about, we'll keep riffing on. They'll keep coming back. We'll keep layering those elements over and over again. And some of the ones that are not as exciting to us, they kind of just start drifting off. And usually in the process, for the most part, people are okay with that because it's like, oh yeah, we're all excited about this now. We've kind of moved on from that moment. But when you do get to creating a piece and people have created a lot of time, like as a performer who's been making moments, I make a bunch of moments and Moises is eventually like, yeah, that one is not working. And you're like, and then it just gets, you're like, I invested so much time in it, right? But the reality is we have what's called an organizing principle. So like our organizing principle for this so the organizing principle for Laramie was what happened to this small town after the murder of Matthew Shepard. They created a ton of moments about Matthew Shepard on its own. But eventually a lot of those got cut because that was not what the piece was about. They discovered in the process that what was actually exciting to them was what happened to this community and also what happened as them coming in as theater makers. Those were the two tracks that became most interesting to them. So everything that did not fit into those two tracks went away because that was not, and like obviously you're like, oh, I loved it, but if you have that very clear, like this is the story we're telling, it becomes very clear what belongs and what doesn't. And so your ego kind of gets taken out of it because I'm like, yeah, I create some beautiful moments, but that's not the story we're telling anymore. So, and so I think that's kind of, and you kind of get there as a group. So I think that through the process, it kind of works itself out.
So it's sort of a reverse pyramid as opposed to.
So we think of it as, versus the pyramid, we think of it as skyscrapers. So like every element has its own tower, and they're all happening at the same time. So instead of like, you know, it being like this where text is down here and everything happens this way, that each, instead of it being layered like this, each layer is a skyscraper that are all happening through time. And so that each element is present at all the different levels of the creation process.
Yeah, how can you keep it organic that your text doesn't eventually override the moment?
Well, because once you create, like that moment was, we all reacted to so strongly, like that would not have been created with text, but we might find text that, we would try a bunch of different texts on there, but once you start noticing kind of like, we're losing what that made us go wow the first time by that text, we know that text is wrong.
So
we have
then
to,
you would get rid of that text.
we maybe not use that text, or we find different text, right? So once you start really exploring the power of these elements, you're not gonna want that power to go away. So when you put text on it, and all of a sudden, all I'm thinking about is a text now, and that's not exciting anymore, then you know that that text is not working. So it's all kind of a play, right? Figuring out what's happening. We obviously as Tectonic use a lot of found text, we're using a lot of interview material, we're using a lot of, so we have to be rigorous about like, we need the text needs to be specific to what people actually said. So for us, it's definitely a game of where does that text fit? Where can we say what that text was saying in a different way, in a theatrical way? And so it's kind of always just a play until we start crafting. We do a lot of playing. We trained, when we did this piece, we resequenced it in like a 4-day workshop, like 5 different times, and tried it in completely different orders, tried it layering different moments differently, putting different texts different places, right? And it was just about finding, okay, that spark, that gave us that, where we all went, that's when you know something in the room, like that's it, right? Versus when you're like, that's okay, right? So I think I have to let you go. But if you have more questions, we'll be around, I think, a little bit. So it was really great working with you all. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and it was great working with you.
Thank you. Paradise Square?
What?